Today, I'm sitting down with Anamitra Banerjee, co-founder and managing partner at Afore Capital, a venture capitalist firm where they manage a portfolio of over $300 million. I'm here to ask him the hard questions of explaining venture capitalists to a bunch of high schoolers. What are his hardest experiences as an entrepreneur? And number one, should you cut classes in high school? You're here because this is what you need to help motivate you to get up and start working. This is Kickstart. Let's go. You've had much success in your professional career. You've worked at some of the biggest companies almost immediately after college. What would you say was the moment in your life that drove you to get to such success and build your own financial empire?
Ooh, financial empire. It's a big word. So first of all, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here.
And thank you for everyone who's taken the time out of a busy Friday to attend this. So hopefully it won't be too boring. Success is also a relative word. I don't know if I can say that I or folks I know have achieved a lot of success. It's all very relative. $300 million sounds like a lot, but in some cases it actually is. But if you compare it to the money that has been raised in venture broadly, it's probably not. It's a small drop in the ocean, maybe. And maybe hedge funds are quite large, but we run a venture venture capital fund based out of San Francisco. So in a way, it's not as challenging as starting a company like a startup, for example, because I think founders and people who work in those companies do all the hard work, whereas we are fortunate to ride the ships that they're sailing. So not as hard a work as maybe people are working at companies.
Yeah, no, I get that. Love the humility, by the way. I personally, maybe it's just my perspective on money. I think $300 million, especially this is one of your, you spent most of your career, you started off, I think you went to an engineering college, didn't you, at NIT in India?
That's right, I did.
So then how did that impact you to get to where you are today? Because engineering to finance, it's a major leap, to my understanding, that is.
Yeah. Most decisions. Some people are fortunate enough to make decisions in their life, and they can see their life. They want to tread a certain path, and they work towards that path. And most of the things that I've done have been sort of accidental or opportunistic. And like the primary goal wasn't to get into engineering. It was something else. I liked sports a lot, and I used to play soccer growing up, but that went nowhere because I was not that good. And growing up in India, as many of you know, almost all roads lead to an engineering school, and that's where I ended up and met some wonderful people. And then life's twists and turns took me in many different directions. I came to the States about 20 plus years ago, and mostly because the work that I was doing was not as interesting, and I needed some change. So I thought I'd come to the US to see what it's like. I didn't actually want to work here. I wanted to go to school here. So I went to grad school and but even then that was not finance. And I wouldn't even think of what I do today as finance per se, even though it is in the business of investing. We're closer to company building, ideation, invention, as opposed to looking at a spreadsheet and deciding where to move money. So in a way, while it might seem like this is in the broad space of finance, which it actually is, the day-to-day work is making investment decisions. Another way to think about it is that as you are in high school, you have a number of decisions to make, a number of opportunities in front of you, and how you spend your time kind of determines the risks you're willing to take. And I've always been a risk taker. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. So when I got the chance to sort of marry the love and affection for startups with with venture capital, which I didn't know existed when I was in engineering school. Of course, I only learned about venture capital much later on. It seemed like a perfect fit.
You mentioned love for startups, but it's interesting. Almost the year, no, it was the year that you graduated from RIT or NIT as it's known today. Like, that same year, you started an internet healthcare company. I think it was called Planet Health Online.
Yeah. There was a misadventure with a number of friends of mine from engineering school. Back then, I think this was before I graduated in '98, and it was like, and I had no idea what the internet was back as such, outside of checking email and going to Yahoo. But some of us had this idea. I think it was, I don't know who it was. Someone I saw, it wasn't me. Someone else had this idea about why don't we connect why don't we connect doctors to patients remotely, so that you can schedule an appointment without actually going to a doctor's office. Could you do that over the internet? I think that was the idea. It didn't go anywhere. It was a good idea. We had like 8 founders, I think, in the company, and everyone was a founder, and we had no concept of raising money or anything like that. But it was a good experience. It was something that we did on the side. And it wasn't a bad idea, but we were naive, I guess. And that was the first experience I ever had of starting anything.
No, that's crazy that you say this, because first of all, this is before that concept was even really around, right? Now I know if I want to make a doctor's appointment, I'm just going to call up my provider and ask, hey, is my pediatrician free? So you guys basically, you guys came up with that idea before it was even a thing, before it was even a thought in most people's heads, which is amazing. How did that experience of working with 8 founders and all, like, that right out of college startup experience, how did that impact you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking as an entrepreneur, and I think founding might be too strong a word. It certainly wasn't my idea. Actually, I don't know whose it was, but it seemed like a good idea though. But it wasn't all that breakthrough. I think there were other folks working on something similar. At least this was in India, and I think in the US there were already some breakthrough companies like that. So. But it was kind of fun to work on something a little less boring than our day jobs, I guess. I guess that was the most fun part, is to get to do something a little bit interesting. I guess the other thing that I found interesting in that way is like most of the time back then we were just writing code, but with this idea, we actually had to take it to market. So we would have to go to doctors or go to because one of the problems we had is we didn't really know any doctors. So it was like you're building a marketplace, so you need doctors on one side and patients on the other. So you got to start with the doctors, and the doctors all wanted us to build their websites. They were also interested in the internet, but they didn't know how to get on the internet, and they didn't really care about our idea, but they were wondering if we could build websites for them, because they thought of us as software developers, which was a way to get them on board. I don't know why it didn't go anywhere, but that was maybe that was a function of time.
Yeah, I get that. So along your it's been a little over, if my math is correct, like a little over 20 years now you've been been working?
Yes, it feels longer than that, but somewhere near there,
yeah. Would you say you've gotten the chance to work with some interesting people?
I think so. I think I've met a lot of interesting people, a lot of great personalities, eccentric people, exceptional people, and that's I guess that's the fun part of working with startups, is you get to see people in their rawest form, like passionate painters.
Yeah. One of the few startups one of the few companies that you work at that wasn't really a startup, I think that would be like Tata Consultancy Services, right?
Yeah, that was no startup. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. In your time there, I believe you worked in India, Spain, and the Netherlands, right?
That's right. You know, Tata Consultancy back then was smaller. I think it was not as big as it is today. And then Infosys and Wipro and others would come into all of these engineering schools in India, and they would roll out the truck, and everyone would just get on, because they needed a lot of developers they just needed a lot of developers. Everything was digitizing. The Y2K was a problem of the day, which you wouldn't know, but a lot of the code back before the millennial, the date format needed to be changed, and so we were cheap labor, which and we were sent out all over the world. Not that I didn't work on that kinds of project, but that was the growth, the jewel in the crown in the Tata empire was Tata Consultancy. So that was my foray into software engineering, and I'm very thankful to them for the opportunity to not only work on interesting projects, but also got to travel the world and talk about interesting people in the department of Tata Consulting that we worked in. The person who ran that overall division is today, I think, the chairman of the Tata Group. So we got to shake hands with some important people back then. Not that we knew that Chandra would become what he is today, but that's an example of someone who is clearly exceptional.
Yep. All right. So after Tata, like you've graduated, like you spent 4 years after graduating from college where you've worked at Tata, you went and founded your own company, and now you're going to go to like New York to study like you wanted to and get your MBA from one of the most prestigious universities, Cornell. Has the network that you built there helped you in your professional career?
Yeah, I went from Bombay, or Mumbai as it is known now. It was like August or like throughout the year, it tends to be warm and hot and muggy in Bombay, and I went from there to Ithaca, which is upstate New York.
Yeah.
And it snows there from October to May, and I'd never seen snow before. And I had heard about Cornell from somewhere else, and I think I had applied, not really expecting much. But I think someone in the admissions office must have taken pity, or I don't know, by chance that I got an interview or something, and I went to meet with the person who interviewed me was in Delhi, and he'd come down, and he was I think it was might have been a second year student or something like that. So that was I really liked all the people I met who were Cornell alumni, and when they accepted, it was terrific for me. It was like it was at the time, it was in everyone's life there are a few moments which really make a big difference, and those are the times when you feel like you really got lucky, and everything getting into Cornell back then was felt like that. It was because I was pretty adamant on not coming to the US to work, but coming to the US to study. Couldn't go there for undergrad, but opportunity to go there for grad school was great. It was business school at Cornell, and the campus was terrific. The school was terrific. The whole place was amazing. And when I first came to the US, and this is maybe an immigrant experience, I hadn't seen as many varieties of toothpaste ever in my life, and so that was quite something.
Wow. So speaking of not working in the US, as you're here today talking to me, we can see that didn't work out, right? You ended up spending like you ended up staying here.
That's right. The plan, I don't know, there was no real plan. The reason I came to the States was because, and the reason I applied to Cornell is because I needed a change, something that was different. Because I realized when I was coding, even though I got to travel a little bit, I was a fine coder, but I didn't really excel at it. I didn't really enjoy the projects all that much, and I wanted to do something different. And I heard about these people who were product managers, who kind of told the developers what to build, and we just built it. And these product manager people seemed interesting, and I was always wondering how they got their jobs, because it seems like they would talk to users and customers to figure out what they wanted and codify that, and then work with engineers to bring those sort of visions to life. And I thought that's a cool job. But turns out that you can't just skip from engineering to product back then. Nowadays it's much easier. And that was an opportunity for me to sort of change swim lanes, if you will. And business school is a great place to do it, where I think 80% of people who go to business school, they switch careers, or that's the reason they're going there, is because they want to like reset. So all in all, it worked out really well, which is I got an opportunity to come to a new country, check out some new industries. And Cornell was great from that perspective because, as I'm sure for many other business schools also, they expose you to a lot of different career opportunities, whether it's consulting or investment banking or corporate finance or marketing, sales, maybe not so much sales, but and back then there was not there were some entrepreneurial classes which I didn't really take, but I realized my real fascination was still product and still tech, and sort of gravitated towards that during my 2 years.
You know, speaking of going into product, I want to jump ahead in your career 5 years to when you get employed at Twitter. Did you know from the start, because like it seems like you kind of get companies and startups. Did you know from the start that it would get to where it is today? Because it had only been around for a few years and they were, what, 200 million users short of Facebook? So did you know it would get to where it is today when you joined?
When I joined, I forget how many users we had. I don't think we had 200 million back then.
No, you were 200 million short of Facebook is what I was saying.
Yeah, maybe Facebook itself was 200 million people, 200 million at the time. Facebook was still small at the time. This is 2008 or so, 2008, 2009. Twitter was definitely smaller. When I was interviewing, I think we at Twitter had 16 people in the company. It was growing like a few people every week or so. Did I know it would become big? I don't like. One thing I've learned in startups is that you don't know how big certain things become, but you do know that it might become big. It's like pinpointing the magnitude is hard, but anticipating the trajectory is not that hard. So I used to work at a company before that. I used to work at a company called Overture out of business school. The reason I got to Twitter is because Overture got acquired by Yahoo, and when I was at Yahoo, I was on the web a lot, and Yahoo had a interesting sort of set of companies that they had acquired, which were fast-moving startups that were based out of South of Market in San Francisco. So I got to interact with a lot of these founders who seemed to be at the cutting edge. They weren't like managing the portal at Yahoo, but they were doing interesting things on video and images and products like Flickr, etc. Yeah. And that's how I heard about Twitter, because Twitter was still out of South Park in San Francisco. And then it was actually Thanksgiving, around about this time in 2008, too early for you and maybe many other high schoolers to remember. But there was a global event during that Thanksgiving. It was a terrorist attack in India in Mumbai. It was one of the big hotels, Taj hotels, and obviously I went to high school in Mumbai and I worked there. I had many friends there, so this was very close to me and my wife. So we were refreshing CNN all the time to figure out what's going on. It was it was a three-day event. And CNN would be slow to refresh, and obviously the TV that they were essentially replaying the same scenes again and again, and I really wanted to find out what was going on there all the time, and then someone linked to Twitter at some point from there, and then that just blew my mind because every single tweet, it felt like it came from the ground. Like there were people who were posting images of snipers across their balcony. They were posting videos across, and they were saying, "Here's what's going on right now." So you were getting second by second update from an event that is happening all the way across the world, and traditional media couldn't deliver that. And so and it was a time that I realized the impact a fast-moving information network could have on your experience and my experience, and everyone in the world kind of figured it out at the same time. So that told me that this is something else. This is something different, something special, very unique. And Facebook had nothing on it. And then that sort of and we began to see kind of similar kind of global events breaking on Twitter consistently in many different languages. So the information traveled at the speed of light, essentially, as fast as information can. And there was no other network like it. And that, by the way, is still true to this day, despite all the drama at Twitter. Twitter does have a monopoly over tweets, and it's the simplest thing to use. So that's how I figured that's how big it could be back then. I don't think a lot of people agreed back then. I think there were people in Yahoo at the time who were calling it a spam network. It's mostly crap, or like who cares what you're having for breakfast?
Yeah.
But and that noise still exists, but underneath that noise, there's still a lot of signal that has no there's nothing quite like it in the world. So yes, I guess I could tell back then that it would be special. I didn't know how big. I'd just say that it's Twitter, the expectation from Twitter, the product has always been much greater than what it has been able to achieve. So it's probably it's a company that probably could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars, but it is not. And there's a gap there between the potential and the reality, and that sort of sadly is true to this day too.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing that you like it helps me understand a lot better why you made the shift, because you seem to like just innately understand this kind of like what's gonna go. And this is the point in your career where you make the major shift from working monetization companies like Yahoo and Twitter, right? You were the product manager of monetization, right? You led monetization team at Twitter.
Yeah, I think they called it the first product manager at the company.
Yep.
Twitter had, I think I joined when we were 20, 25 people, and it was mostly engineering. They had no Indian engineers at the time, though, which is the weirdest thing for a tech company, but that changed afterwards. But it was not an obvious choice, I would say. It's still scary because Yahoo was a very good job, a stable job, and I didn't work for Yahoo proper. I worked for a company called Overture. Overture itself has its own story, because Overture invented paid search advertising. You know, all those links you see on Google, I don't know if you use Google at all or not. You see those paid links, these ads, that was actually not invented by Google. It was invented by this company called Overture, which Google emulated and built AdWords and AdSense around. But Overture got acquired by Yahoo for about $2 billion. So that's how I ended up at Yahoo. But there was a point, but Yahoo was a good job. It was a stable job. I wasn't going anywhere. But the risk was low, and after I had my offer from Twitter, I was still in two minds. Do I join this sort of small startup? And we had to move from LA to San Francisco to do that. So I wanted to talk to I wanted to talk to Ev, who was the CEO of Twitter at the time and a co-founder. And he was about to get on stage to speak at TED. And someone must have relayed to him that, you know, I'm in two minds. What should I do? I'm panicking a little bit, and he took the time to answer my call. And he was kind enough. He's basically what he told me is that join Twitter, you'll never regret it. And that was it. So sometimes in life you just need extreme clarity and certainty that only some people can provide. That almost all risk kind of fades away. And I kind of felt like that after that call. And it was a wonderful team to work with. The founders, the CEO, and the subsequent CEOs. It was a great experience.
Yeah. All right. So now that you're like transitioning from tech, all like you're moving out of you're staying in finance-ish, right? Like as you described, it's not the spreadsheets, it's more of company management. But now that you're moving to working monetization in tech companies to this company management and more finance-based thing when you move to Foundation Capital, what leads you to make that change?
What leads me? I didn't know there was such a thing called venture capital until I got to Twitter.
Okay.
You know, as in life, as you'll realize as you grow, is that as your sort of envelope or your orbit increases, you begin to realize that there are things you didn't know about how the world works. And it's always good to be curious in general, to see how certain things work and ask what people do. So, and that way you kind of run into interesting career options, interesting choices people make, and that can help you figure out what you'd like to do. Also, one of the things that happened when I was at Twitter is that is that there were these VCs, venture capitalists, who had invested in Twitter and were very vested in helping Twitter in various different ways. They would walk the halls, they would talk to people, they would talk to employees. We had this thing called Tea Time on Friday, where actually the idea was that everybody in the company comes together and we just talk about our sort of work during the week. And the notion was tea will be served, but it was mostly beer and wine. But it was a social time, and a lot of people who are investors, angel investors, they hung out with people. That's why I figured out there's this thing called venture capital. And then later on, I realized that that venture capitalists invest in companies like Twitter. I learned that they had invested in companies that that are everyday brands like Amazon and Google and Apple. They're all invested by these behemoths of our industry, who are all venture capitalists who took extreme risk on these companies. And that to me seemed intriguing, which is like I can work on one Twitter at a time, but wouldn't it be more interesting if I could find 10 Twitters at a time? So instead of putting all your bets on blue, what if you had like 10, 11 bets? Just seems like the next level, and it's interesting to some people, and it's uninteresting to other people. I thought it was kind of interesting, so I began to sort of explore what these people actually did. I went down to Sand Hill Road. It was easy to get appointments with many of these folks because another thing you'll realize in life is that you can use your calling cards from one place to open doors into the next place. So think of everything as like a stepstone into the next step, and then the next step, and then so on and so forth. So I got these meetings, and these venture capitalists in Sand Hill Road had these wonderful offices, very unlike Twitter, which was scrappier. But these venture capitalist offices were very well decorated. They had these plaques on the walls about all the IPOs of famous companies like Google and Amazon and Apple. And then the office was mostly bare, not a lot of people, but it was very well furnished. So I realized all the venture offices kind of looked the same. They all did the same thing, and they had these positions called an entrepreneur in residence. And what that basically means is that if you're out of a job, you can basically hang out at a venture capitalist office and just get paid and do nothing, which to me sounded pretty amazing. And it was a good transition point. So when I got an opportunity to do that at a wonderful firm called Foundation Capital in Menlo Park, I couldn't resist. So I spent 10 months there, and then eventually ended up joining the firm.
Yeah, no, that's like, wow. It's what I think runs $2.4 billion portfolio. So that's how you got your start in venture capitalism. How, like, let's say I didn't have those connections at Twitter. Let's say, for example, I am a fresh out of college grad in the Bay Area. I graduated, let's say, I don't know, let's go for Santa Clara University, something decent, right? Let's say I'm graduating from Santa Clara University. How do I go from there to joining one of these firms?
Joining a venture capital firm? Great question. They say that venture capital is an apprenticeship business, which basically means it's a very weird business because you don't really know what you're doing for a long time. And I'll break the business down in simple terms. So what you basically do is that you ask other people for money, and then you create a fund, and they put money into that fund. And then you take that money and you invest in extremely risky startups, and 9 out of 10 times that money goes to zero. So you're more or less guaranteed to lose a lot of money, but 1 out of 10 times the company you invest in becomes 100xer, 1000xer, 10,000xer, etc., and that returns all the money. And once you return the money, you return it back to your investors, and you keep some. So it's a very strange asset class, if you will, in investing. Folks who are like losing money as a day-to-day business seems like odd to most people. So it takes people who are extremely risk seeking to get into this venture, get into this industry, it has some cachet amongst a lot of people, because many of the household names and household companies that we take for granted were all backed by venture capitalists at some point or other. Almost every internet service you use is venture. The software that we're using right now, Zoom, was backed by venture capitalists. This is so almost you kind of, we don't normally think about it, but it was. So that to me is really intriguing, that if you can find these gems early on, they have a small chance, but if it works really well. And the best way to, I guess there's no best way to enter this industry. One thing that has happened that is for the better is that there are many more opportunities in venture than there were maybe 10 years ago. There are many more venture funds because tech itself has grown. Venture investing as a result has grown also. There are various different types of venture funds in the past, but if you can raise money on your own, you can become a venture capitalist. Anyone can become a venture capitalist. You don't necessarily have to join a fund to start to become a venture capitalist. You can practice it on your own. There's something called angel investing, which is similar to venture capital, which is let's say you have $1,000, you can invest in companies with just $1,000 today, and invest in startups. And so I think there are different people have different sort of points of advice about how to sort of join. For some folks say, you can never start too early. Join as early as possible. And many venture funds recruit on campus, or they have programs that goes and recruits on campus all over the US. Usually that starts as an analyst and then you become an associate and so forth. And another path is to actually join a startup at some point, as early as possible, to actually experience what it's like to work at a company, to do something, to contribute to the development, whether it's a product or engineering or sales. And then eventually sort of transition into venture. That's another path that a lot of people take. But the reason this industry is also very sort of different from others is that the people who become very successful, if you track back to where they started their careers, there have been journalists and reporters who became venture capitalists and became very successful. There are equity analysts from Wall Street who became venture capitalists and became very successful. There are engineers and product managers and former operators who became very successful. There are traditional sort of folks who went straight from college to a venture fund as analysts, and they became very successful too. So you got to ask, like, what are the attributes of a successful person in venture? It doesn't necessarily matter where you start. But the attributes of some of these people are very, very similar.
All right. So if really all you need are those attributes, then do you need a knowledge of finance to get into venture capitalism?
It's always good to know how to make money, because it helps you understand the investments you're going to make. And the hope is that if you put in $1, you should get more than 10 times that or 100 times that, and there should be an option for it. And how you'll get that is important. And it's always good to know somewhat about finance, but it is probably more important to know about technology and engineering and product, about why some things will work. What is the technical innovation? What is the product innovation? Why will something be breakthrough? That's probably more material and meaningful and important than having a degree in accounting or knowing how accounting works, because that's not as relevant to sort of understanding the venture risks that the investors will be taking.
All right, I get that. So you were talking about raising money. How do you rate? Let's say I have just actually no. I want to jump back to angel investing. So you mentioned that you could start off with $1,000. So let's say I'm me, and my parents say, you know what, Shivansh, for your birthday, why don't you take this $1,000 and go invest in a company? How would I go do that?
Yeah, well, you would have wonderful parents if they give you $1,000 to invest. There are various ways to do it. There are some software tools out there. There's something called AngelList, where anyone can invest any amount of money. I believe, I'm not exactly sure, but that's where a lot of founders or startups would list their companies and say, this is what we do. This is how much we're raising. If you're interested, you can invest. And I think AngelList allows anyone to invest a very small sums of money. I don't know exactly what the number is. That's one way to start. Another, but a better way to start though is, instead of just putting that money into a company, it is better to start thinking about analyzing businesses or analyzing ideas, and being very thoughtful about even if you don't have the money, it doesn't stop you from doing the analysis, doing the thinking work about why something should work and beginning to have a point of view on almost any kind of business. So unpacking businesses, unpacking products, unpacking ideas is probably even a better way to start than to immediately start putting money in. Because if you had $1,000, here's the other thing that's not always clear to people when you get into venture capital, is that when you put in that $1,000, that's locked away for 10 years, maybe more, 12 years, because you won't get that money back. It's an illiquid asset. What that basically means is that unlike putting some $1,000 into buying stock, which you can get out of tomorrow or the day after at any time that you want, you can become liquid, get the cash back at any time you want by selling. You can't sell in venture capital. Someone else decides when the selling happens, because these are private companies, and until they go public or until they're acquired, which can be decades, your cash is locked up. So you got to ask the question: Is this the best place to put $1,000 for 10 years, or will my returns be better somewhere else?
All right. Yeah. That clarifies it a bit more. So let's talk about jumping past back, I guess, more to a bit more of your own mindset thing. How did you know this was the thing you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
I don't know. I didn't know at the time when I became an investor. My sort of naive idea was that I would use venture capital or be a venture capitalist to find some really awesome founders and awesome companies and join them in building what they are, because I like the Twitter experience and I wanted more of that. But a very successful venture capitalist that I spoke with, and I told him about my plan. He said, you know what, founders can sense who is in and who's out. Founders only want investors who are all in, and if you're not all in, they can sense that. You can't dip your toe in the water. You got to go all in on this. And that's when I decided that I had to take this seriously. I have to fully be an investor, fully commit to investing and not joining companies if I'm going to learn anything. Then that's what I began to do. I quite liked it. I guess it works really well for people who are sort of curious, competitive, and are good with context switching. To give you an example, many engineers like to code very deeply because it's a creative experience for a lot of folks. They don't want to switch gears. They don't want to go into meetings. That's why engineers often have no meeting Tuesdays and no meeting Wednesdays or whatever, because you want to just do one thing throughout the day or throughout the week. For me, that's a little boring. I like a little variety, and venture capital is good for that, because I can meet with a like a payroll software company in the morning, and a trucking company in the afternoon, and a social network the day after. Like every day is something different. And for me, that works out really well. So I realized that I was beginning to like it. And when you talk with founders, you are essentially talking with people who are living in the future. They're imagining the way they want to make the world. And that experience is very sort of engaging and contagious. It's a very optimistic view of the world, and I began to sort of fall in love with it. And not every meeting is like that, but I think that's the adrenaline shot. That's one of the reasons why this job doesn't feel like a job most of the times. It feels like a privilege.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's okay. So you were talking about startups and founders and the the passion that they have. Is there an age limit on founders and making a startup? Like, for example, could a freshman in high school make a startup?
Yeah, well, actually, a freshman in high school actually did. And it's one of the most successful startups in the world. I don't know if he was actually a freshman or not, but Mark Zuckerberg, when he started Facebook, as it was known back then, it was a college project because he wanted to meet people in college. They had this thing in every college, I think back then, I think even now, I certainly experienced it. It's called the book face or whatever. It's like basically a printed out profile picture and bio of everyone in your class so that you could refer to people because as you're going into class for the first time, you don't know everyone, so they were printed out. And he just put that online. I believe it's a story, and everybody began to like it, and he built a bunch of features around it, and he took it from college to college to college, and that's the way Facebook started. I think Snapchat is very similar, where it started out of Stanford by some college students. So you can never start too early. Now, whether you raise venture capital or not is something else, but you can never start too early to start with your ideas at any time and see what works.
And how? Let's say you were trying. So one thing that I read about your company was that it like I guess you said that the reason you started Afore was because a lot of investors had some really strict things for what they were looking for when they were going into seed, which is why you created this more pre-seed kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So the question is, why did we start Afore? Or
No, the question is what class since you're in a whole new category, right? You're not in seed or series A, you're in a different category. What are you looking for, and what kind of things is the a bar, I guess, because you must have a lower bar than seed funding, right?
um, um, I wouldn't say a lower bar.
Okay.
I would say a different bar.
Different bar, gotcha.
One of the things that founders often have to hear from investors is that whatever they're working on is the idea. It's too early for capital. It's just they don't have enough revenue, they don't have enough growth, they don't have enough customers. They just need to be a little bit more further along before anyone would invest. And usually founders don't like to hear that. They don't like to hear that they're too early, especially from early stage investors. And that was what we are trying to change at Afore, where hopefully nothing is too early, where we are able to put significant amounts of investments into companies, irrespective of whether they have revenue or not, whether they've launched or not. And that's the risk we're taking with Afore. Hopefully, that is providing capital and making it accessible to more people for whom it would otherwise not be possible to attract capital. I think so that there could be more entrepreneurs starting more companies, and the reason we would not invest in them would not be because they're too early. So we're trying to change the way the system works a little bit.
Yeah. All right, let's just change gears here a bit. One of the audiences I'd mentioned to you before starting this was high school and college. So I want to ask a question that'll relate to us. Putting aside your personal preference, would you say that would you recommend going into the field of finance or any business field? Like we have a lot of STEM, law, we have a lot of that nowadays. But would you recommend finance or business over that?
Um, I think it's a very personal choice. It's a very personal choice. I think it's a good idea to expose yourself to various different various different options. I find that, at least in going back when I was younger, I would often correlate my interest with the quality of the teacher. If the teacher was good, I would take an interest. If the teacher wasn't good, I wouldn't take as much of an interest. And in going back, things that I would change is that I would probably expose myself to learn different things, sort of sample various things to essentially figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. What was I going back to if in my free time? What was I passionate about? So it's not one size fits all. It's not like pick STEM over business or finance, etc. But expose yourself to different ideas, different themes. And as you go from high school to college, I think that opportunity will increase radically, where you can audit classes that you don't have to take all the time. But I think experience different things in life. I think you get this time from high school and in college where you don't have to pick too early, and you don't have to stress out whether you're running behind or not, whether you're losing time or not. This is the time to sort of discover yourself, discover what you like. It's the kind of option that many of us growing up in India didn't have. There was no option. All the roads led to one kind of school or another. I think that's what I would recommend, is like don't worry too much about a specific sort of stream just yet. Have some basics, do all the basic stuff so that you have some comfort over the fundamentals, but then remain very, very open and opportunistic about new ideas and new courses of learning. See what you like.
Okay, so you mentioned auditing classes, and I just have something just jumped into my head. If you were a high schooler now, with your passion for auditing classes, would you ever think about just auditing a class in high school? Let's say during your 6-period day, you didn't want to attend one of your classes. Would you ever consider auditing a different class during high school?
I've never went to high school here, so I don't know exactly
Okay.
how it works. I know the college process a little bit better, and I do understand in high school you're trying really hard, you're working really hard to earn credits to get into the right colleges. So you may not have as much free time, or the exploration opportunity may not quite be there. So I kind of get that, but I don't think I'm all that. I would say, like, even if it doesn't have to be school, it doesn't have to be tied to what is taught in high school. It could be outside of school. It could be another area. Like, the opportunity to learn is so high. I think what I would recommend, or what is generally good, is to be hyper curious about things and to learn, because nowadays you can do that on the internet you couldn't do before, which you can go fairly deep on any subject. And what is really interesting from interviewing people, when I was at Twitter or Yahoo or others, we would interview a lot of folks who were interns. The folks that always stood out had depth in something. And it's like, whatever it was, you could have a really deep conversation about something or other that they went really deep in, something that they were really passionate about, and it felt very authentic. And I think those people always stood out in some way because they were able to craft a story about their life that was true to them, was authentic to them, but it also resonated really well with when you're because it tells you it gives you a little vignette about someone's personality. So whatever you try a few things and figure out what you want to go deep on. So take maybe, I don't know, 80-20 rule maybe. Spend 20% of the time looking at various different things, whether inside or outside of school, and then spend 80% of the time going deep on fewer things.
Yeah. Okay, so depth. All right, that's really interesting. I love that. Like, it's amazing to hear that you guys really value passion over a lot else. And I assume that authenticity is an amazing trait that you would want to have as an entrepreneur.
That's right.
Yeah. Would you say that it's hard? Like, how hard would you say it is to be an entrepreneur? And what have been your most difficult struggles, and how have you overcome it?
Yeah. Entrepreneur. I think that another thing that's worth sort of surfacing is getting comfortable with failing is a good life experience. Trying difficult things and failing, or taking risk and failing, because it's we all fail. But I think what differentiates some people is folks who are able to get back on the horse even after they fall, and very, very quickly, and becoming resilient. One of my one of the things that one of the benefits of working in our business is you get to take experiences or learnings from one industry and apply it to a different industry, and you learn that the traits of a lot of folks who have been successful in general over life is that they've been resilient, and they've failed a lot, but they've also succeeded, because people ultimately forget about your failures. They remember your successes. But if you don't take a lot of chances, you won't if you don't put yourself in positions to get lucky, you won't get lucky. So, and that means that you take a lot of risk, and by definition, if you take risk, you fail. It's how you handle that failure. I think that matters a lot, and getting comfortable and used to that early on is a good thing. And you don't have to be right every time. And that could be as simple as like selling lemonade on a street corner. Many people will pass you by and may not feel like a good experience, but that's a first entrepreneurial experience of doing something, building something. Trying to raise money for whatever else is also another great experience. Whatever the cause may be, doesn't matter, because to pull $1 out of someone's clenched fist takes a lot of effort. You got to hear a lot of no's, and that kind of, I think it helps build character too. So I think risk, failing, and being hyper curious about everything are sort of good traits.
Okay, yeah. That's really amazing. The risk. It's interesting. I hear a lot of things from you that like I thought I was gonna I thought I honestly was gonna come in here and hear that venture capitalism is extremely algorithmic based and you're taking the safe bets. But here you are talking about being authentic and taking risks, and it's truly amazing to hear that this profession can be so it can really accept these people who are ready to really just venture out into the unknown. And I'm really glad to hear that.
There are various different types of investing. There's the hedge fund business and quantitative trading, which is completely unemotional. It's got none of the things that I'm talking about. Maybe the competitive curiosity personality traits are good, but it's very quantitative. It's a lot about analysis. It's a lot about running spreadsheet models. It's a lot about operational efficiency, things like that. That's when you have a lot of data. You have a lot of revenue data, metrics data to analyze. But venture capital is a different kind of risk. It's the word venture means taking risk, and it's basically risk capital. You're putting money into someone's idea, and that is the riskiest bet you could take. That's why if you look at all the money that goes into all sorts of financial assets, a very small portion, a tiny portion, maybe less than 1% or 2%, goes into venture capital. But the returns are superior for venture capital compared to many other asset classes, because the outcomes are very, very large. So it kind of requires you to be imaginative, optimistic, thoughtful about about backing people. But the good news is anyone can do it. You don't necessarily need a degree from a fancy school to get into it. Anyone can do it. Anyone can start at any time, but it does take a long time to get good at it.
How do you fund this risk taking? You need to have some. Okay, let me put it this way. Let's say if I want to start a company and I'm a broke college student, I don't have generally the funds to start taking this risk of starting my startup. Right? To fund these activities, you might need a job. But to get a job, you need experience. How do you leave this vicious cycle and when you don't have the means to fund your risks?
Yeah, that's step number one. The hardest part about starting is starting, because there are many, many reasons why you shouldn't start or couldn't start or won't start. So the first step is the biggest step, is to have commitment and conviction behind your idea, sacrificing a lot. But it's not that hard. Nowadays, you don't need to spend a lot of money to get a website up. Everything is it's cheaper than buying a cup of coffee, maybe, to put something up on Wix or somewhere else. And many good ideas have actually come out of college, solving problems college students face, whether lazy college students who can't go down to the cafeteria to get food. You can have delivery, 15-minute delivery, right to your dorm, or you want to get into dating, and that's how Tinder started in the fraternity and sororities in LA, or Facebook, for example. So find ideas or problems in your own sort of zone and community and begin to solve for that, and solve problems basically, or identify opportunities and solve for it. I think that's where entrepreneurs are really good at, is because they have this nose for opportunity. They always have a nose for where something could take off, and always be thinking about that is the first step.
Yeah. Okay, so you might not need that much money then to start a company, but for Afore, I'm pretty sure, considering you offer like $1 million at a $10 million cap, you're going to need a lot of capital to fund that. What are your sourcing channels for this funding?
So sourcing, how we find companies, you mean?
No, like how do you get the funds to invest in these companies?
That's a bigger problem, huge problem. Asking people for money is one of the hardest thing you can do. So, and we've had to start from scratch also. I think you just do it. I think it's sort of like shaking trees. You start shaking trees and something or other falls, and you keep shaking trees. And as long as you're okay with getting a lot of no's, and you don't give up and you're relentless, everyone ultimately figures this out. There are very, very few examples of folks who wanted to raise money for a venture fund, but could not at all raise anything. You might not be able to raise a lot of money, but that's okay, because you don't need to necessarily, you can change your investing strategy to accommodate whatever amount of money you've raised. And so that the hard part is like raising some money. And the second hard part is finding good companies to put that money into, which may be even harder to do than raising money. But if it were easy, it wouldn't be as much fun.
I like that's to hear that there's an industry of people who consider risk taking fun is just amazing. How did you? So okay, there's no way though that, like, let's say I have no credibility that I can come out here and start asking for money and get it. How did you build your credibility?
Yeah, it starts from scratch. You always got to start from scratch. I think one good practice is to just help people. Is help people and expect nothing in return, and then they remember you, and then just do that as something you do all the time. Like someone who joined our firm recently, started from scratch. He would save money that he'd earn, and he would invest $1,000 at a time into founders that he really liked. And then before he did that, he would just work on behalf of founders for free. He would just help them out with things. He would get them maybe customers, make some introductions, and he'd be willing to do his work for free, expecting nothing in return. Now, founders who haven't raised a lot of money, for them, that's great. They've got someone to work for. So one thing you could do is to help people out in any way you can. And what you realize is if you do that with 5 people a day, and that's about 25 people in a week, and you add that up into a month, you already helped 100 people or so. And out of the 100 people, that's how you grow your network. The idea is to start somewhere, and these things compound over time. And what compounding means is that it's really slow in the beginning, but then it really picks up over time. So get started as early as you can by just helping people and just meeting interesting people, and see what you can do for them.
Okay, so network. So okay, all right. To sum up, so from the biggest things I know I've gotten from the beginning have got to be networking, take risks, and be authentic. And you don't need to come out of a career in you don't need to come out of a college degree or a career in finance to join venture capitalism. Really seems like an open to all industry who have the guts to do it.
Yeah, and be helpful, I think, and
yeah.
Because in our business, one of the real sort of good things about tech and venture capital, tech broadly, bigger than venture capital, is that a willingness for people to help each other despite how successful they've become. I don't know too much about the finance world or the maybe Hollywood, but it's pretty hard to get a hold of someone famous to help you out. But in the Valley, I feel founders, no matter how successful they are, if you can get in front of them, they're willing to help you out, because someone somewhere down the line helped them get started. Like someone helped me get started on my career. Someone took a chance. The first job I got at Overture was a freak accident. I don't know who forwarded my resume, but I got my job on the last day of school in Cornell, and I was very, very lucky to get that. And similarly at Twitter, someone took a chance. So someone's always taking a chance because someone else took a chance on them, which is a beautiful thing. In our business, it has real network effects. So someone's going to take a chance on you, and when they do, recognize it, and then remember it and pay it forward.
That's wow. Okay, so really, venture capitalism is an industry built on paying it forward. Oh my goodness! Wow, this
And
has
I would
been
say,
so.
I would say I would just broaden that out beyond just banking, because many people would go to various different types of industries. But I think it's a generally good attribute to have is that more you help people, turns out they will help you, because life is a multi-turn game where roles, responsibilities, hierarchy changes all the time. You never know who's gonna help you down the road. So be kind to your neighbors and help them out. You just never know when you might need someone's help.
That's okay. So pay it forward. That's help others and then pay it forward. That's amazing. I personally have gained so much from this session. I would love to keep talking, but didn't realize how much time flew. We're out of time. So I just wanted to thank you and everyone who showed up to this live taping so much for coming. This should be available soon enough to stream on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Once again, I really appreciate all your time, especially yours, because you've given us some amazing, amazing things to think about.
Thank you, Shivans, for this wonderful opportunity. And hopefully, if it's too boring, folks can 2x the speed and listen to it. It'll be over faster.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday evening. Have a wonderful rest of your long weekend. Thank you one more time and have a great evening.
Bye bye. Good night.
Good night.